On this episode, we're going to go through a shoot that we just finished where we had 3 different subjects that we did on 2 different sets. We're going to talk about one of our new favorite tools that we definitely cannot live without now. And we're also going to talk about how we fix some issues when it comes to wireless DMX and color temperature with our lights and more on this episode of The Debrief.
We've just spent the last 2 days filming with a seminary called Asbury Theological Seminary. And we've gone through 2 different sets and I think 4 people on camera. There's a ton to unpack. So let's kind of get right into it. Let's first talk about these 2 sets that we have. So this was super cool. Morgan and I were sitting in the room while Tyler and Jay are setting up set number 1. And I'm like, hey, I think the camera angles work out for set number 2. So let's take a look at one of the sets that we kind of put up there. And what we realized is we were able to take one of these sets and then this first set that you can see here, we had this set up and we were like, oh, okay, this looks really cool. We just need to flip it so that the lighting is all motivated from the same side. And I think we can make it where barely any effort's involved to toggle between this first set and this second set that you see here. So let's kind of get into that and let's talk about these 2 different sets. The motivation, of course, we kind of made the lighting the same. Of course, we went in and tweaked the lighting per person and all of that. But yeah, just react to that. How did that feel just from a production standpoint? It was really just switching out, a chair and a table or something like that?
It was extremely easy. I think the main thing besides the chair and the table being swapped, here you go, here's the first set. The main thing that you'll see between the 2 sets is the color of the rim lights were also changed because we had a warm bookshelf light and those lamps that are sort of in the back too. Those are a lot warmer. So we adjusted those so that sort of blended into the environment. And then also for the other one, it was a more like 5600 outdoor sunny sort of feel. So those were the difference between the 2.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, it seemed like it was like one of the smoothest set changes ever. Yeah. And this is something we already learned from doing a previous shoot where we kind of had that camera angle in the same position. But speaking of camera angle, you guys did not have it this tight when we started. It was wider, which is something I'm always kind of pushing for. And then I'm the one that changed it.
The irony.
Yeah, I know. So I just want to acknowledge the irony is not lost on me. I did that for 2 reasons. One, we were experiencing some Moiré with his shirt, and this is not something we've had in a long time. So we're using the raw light OLPFs on our 6K Cinema 6Ks. Sorry, on our Studio 6K cameras. And what's interesting is before we did that, man, the Moiré was unbelievable.
Terrible.
And so something you need to know if you're not already an Ultimatte user is we have found Ultimatte seems to accentuate any Moiré. So if you have like almost an imperceptible, but just, man, the trained eye can see that's about to be fairly substantive Moiré. And that Moiré is that kind of pattern that happens that kind of, when there's a tight image and it kind of brings it in and has this sort of like, I don't know, they're kind of overlaid. Google it. You'll see exactly what it is if you don't know. But that was happening on his shirt. So this is a massive pro tip that I want to start with. If you're experiencing Moiré, something that I've learned that can potentially solve it or certainly reduce it is change the focal length of the lens. So essentially what we did is we're using Sigma 18-35 glass for this wide shot. So we were, I don't know where we were. We were at 35 or 18 or, somewhere in between. And then I just moved the camera in and then racked it out a little bit. And so the framing ended up being similar, but I was able to adjust the focal length, which changes where the focus hits on the lens. And that focus of where it hits on the lens can dramatically affect the moire. So that was able to solve it. The other thing it was doing is I knew we were going to have a punch. And so I knew this was going to be our wide shot. And I don't know if it's easy to get to the punch, but the punch that we had is a little magic trick we do where we take, there it is, where we take that same wide shot. So that's the same wide shot. And we're just feeding that into a separate Ultimat. And we're taking that separate Ultimat and we're just going in and applying a new background that's a little blurrier. So it's not truly 4K. So that's kind of what we have on that is it's kind of a in between 4K and 1080 version of it where we've kind of jumped in a little bit into the image. So the edges are just a little not as crisp. But we think it works. And especially by applying just a little bit more of a blur to that background plate behind it, we think it really sells the illusion of a secondary punch shot. So it's not just a punch of just zooming digitally in on the overall image. Instead, we're still doing a composite and that background is just a little blurrier. And I think it sells a pretty cool illusion. In my dream world, I'd have an 8K camera that's outputting 8K to an 8K Ultimat, and then I would take that and then, of course, apply different backgrounds. But Blackmagic has an 8K Ultimat, but that workflow doesn't exist yet. I need a nice, beautiful camera that outputs 8K. So, dear Blackmagic, give us a 8K output.
Well, and I think that's something that IPE is going to help solve is make it where you can really expand up into that sort of 8K range, where right now with SDI, you'd have to have 4 12G SDI connections. Well, now that means you can, oh man, I can't do the math in my, that'd be 148 gig, fiber optic connection. And so that would be much easier to manage than 4 SDI connections. And so hopefully as 2110 and stuff takes on, that'll be something that we'll be able to do. But then we've realized, we've talked about this, to do this punch trick, we would need a whole ATEM essentially, that all it would do is take that 8K in and just make it bigger. And that's it. That's its entire job.
For the NIME, you just use DVE to resize it. So we have an idea. We have visions. We're just a couple of steps away from being able to pull off a really magical thing. So maybe in the future, if something like that gets created, that'd be really cool. Hey, so here's the deal. I wanted to talk a little bit. I really liked this library kind of set that we had. This is the first time we've been able to use this set, and I think it worked really great. And one of the things I really liked is the lady yesterday afternoon, not this one, but the other one. I like this set too. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other set is with the library is the lady came in and she had a black outfit. And so originally we were going to put her on the set. Maybe you just saw, depending on how we edit this. But I really wanted to put her on this set with the black chair and just really kind of encompass that kind of monochromatic look. And so I think why this works so well is because her outfit, the black chair, all of that, work together to create kind of a very uniform look and feel. And so similarly, we got away. Now I am going to ask for that other set. Similarly, with the other set that we did, she had on a blue navy dress that almost perfectly matched the navy of the chair. I mean, it would be hard for us to do better than that. And so I think the other reason this looks so nice is the color scheme is also super uniform. So we've got essentially a tan chair, which we see some elements of tan and wood in the background, and then we have her skin tone, and then we have the blue of the actual dress and how that matches the background. So this was super cool because we got away with 2 people having essentially a very uniform look. And even Kevin, in the morning of the first day, he had a really nice outfit too, where he had some khaki pants and there you go, and then the navy shirt or whatever, blue,
orange pants.
yeah, whatever. But those colors also were very complementary. Yeah. I think if I could have done anything, I would have put him in a navy type of chair just to really tie in that. But it's a very nice look. This leads me to something I want to talk about, which we've talked about, but we haven't done yet. And that's around like a style guide or a visual guide, an outfit guide. Obviously, I'm not like the most I'm not caring about fashion that much to know what the keywords are.
Yeah, people
but
who've watched previous debriefs have seen you in a hoodie with the Mona Lisa dabbing. So
I'm a trendsetter. So I think what I'm interested in on this is looking through something Isaac brought up of like, wait a minute, Isaac, I don't remember what you had seen, but you saw
I was
something.
at a furniture store.
Yeah.
And they at furniture stores will have kind of this like card that's laid out with all of the like materials you can buy that furniture in. And so that's more so just to kind of show examples, but they also had this section where what it was it's a big table. And it's all the swatches that all their different furniture is available in, all the materials, colors, etc. And you can start just taking them and say, like, well, what if I want this and this? And you kind of set them next to each other and you start to kind of get a sense of, is this cohesive? And so my thought was like, oh, well, we could kind of provide this guide of what fits well in, tones like this and this and this. And so kind of provide a way for people to look at, oh, these kind of swatches of color are what fit really well with this.
Yeah. So I love that. I want us to do that. So right now, if you go to SociallyU's website, sociallu.com, you can click on like the sets tab and you'll see some of the sets. It's not all of them, but you'll see some listed there. And then inside that, what I want to do is kind of have next to it like outfits to wear or colors to pick your clothing from that would go along well with this. So the big pro tip here is the more your talent can match the environment they're in, the more the production value just goes up. So definitely consider that. Or maybe it's the more they stand out, right? It's whatever your look is, but the more intentional you can be about the actual attire that the person is wearing, I believe just the higher the production goes. So that's something we're working towards. And along those lines, I don't know how we would do this yet, and I certainly don't know who these people are, but there are influencers that exist that all they do is talk about fashion. And there's men's fashion and women's fashion that they really get into it. And not like, I'm not talking like high fashion where you're wearing like saran wrap and an aluminum foil hat or whatever, but I'm talking about like actual functional fashion. So I think it would be really interesting to find some of those influencers and work with them to kind of create a lookbook or style guide for each of our sets. And so then they could come alongside and we could promote them and they could promote us. Of course, everybody could win and they could kind of give some like expert advice when it comes to this set. This is what they would want to wear. And I think we could even do that where someone who's really set up to do video where they could just hop in and be like actually talk about the set and in real time kind of just express how they would style for it and all of that. So I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think that could like level up a little bit of like, hey, here's your set and here's influencer style guide person,
wardrobe consultant.
Right. You're right. It's like a virtual wardrobe consultant. There you go. For this set. There you go, Tyler. That's it. So I'd like to look into that. Obviously, I don't have any knowledge there. Hey, if you're watching this and you somehow know a great wardrobe, a virtual wardrobe consultant, I'd love to be connected with them to see if we could partner up and do something cool together.
Hey, before we get away from like sort of discussing the sets and whatnot, Isaac, can you pull up the original shot that I gave?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is the place that we have talked about a few times. This is the Kinley Hotel. So this is the original plate that we shot
Right.
Before any alteration. So you'll see it's flipped the opposite direction. That's because we flipped it so that it was an easy set change for us when we went to the other because we had the same light motivation. And then Isaac, if you'll bring up the generative fill version. So here, well, actually, this isn't the actual one that we use. So this is another version.
Sure.
So this is a different one. So if you go cut between this and the actual
Well, I was
shot,
going to show real quick, and you can see when you mirror it, and then when you go to the actual shot,
nice. Of course, we changed some of the stuff, and I believe the shelving a little bit
Sure.
on other
Just
versions. Yeah. But so just before, I've talked about it a ton on other debriefs, so I just wanted to bring it up again before we moved on. But yeah, so we flipped this one and changed it up a little bit.
One tiny thing that we had to deal with was that plant in the background. When we initially had
Yeah.
the way we had the background framed, it was like right directly behind her head, so it looked like it was coming out of her head. So we had to move it a little bit off of that green plant, even though we didn't get it all the way. It works well enough. Not look like she was wearing a green hat or something.
Yeah, we probably should have actually just removed that. But the other thing we did, I don't know if it shows it in the original, Isaac, if you can pull that back up, but
Other side
now. But you'll see this little planty. Oh,
Sorry, I didn't know which thing you were trying to look at.
that's great. If you'll just hop back over to the other one. This plant, you'll notice it really has some big pieces that are kind of coming out. And it was like, man, that's a lot of planty kind of taking over and stealing the show. So when we go ahead and go to the actual shot that we ended up with, on this actual shot, right, we just toned it down. There wasn't as much right there. And so what's interesting about this is that means we've kind of got this, I don't know exactly what area of it is, but like this is like a static image. And so that's pasted on top of a video. So like if I should probably do a different color, but like that little section right there, and then all the window right here, this is all live video, right? So it's moving around, but this part in red that you see here, this is kind of static and not really moving. And the other thing we've realized is like there was this big picture, right, that was right here and whatever. And so the way you kind of get around that is what we did is essentially feathered in, this is video right here, basically, minus the plant that I talked about. And then this right here is a still image. And so this still image right here is not changing, but allowing this kind of graduated fill where it's kind of going from just all video to then fading into the image lets us have this image stay here, but still let, as a car goes by or something like that, it'll still influence all the wall right here on the lighting.
Yeah.
So that helps make it feel more natural and normal on that.
Yeah, I think one of the most important parts about doing the generative fill is spending a lot of time feathering and blending those edges.
Yeah.
If you don't do that right, then it becomes very obvious. But once you blend it enough and you get those edges soft, then it's hardly even noticeable.
And the other big thing is make sure and scroll through your timeline.
Yes.
And in a weird way, it works better to kind of go fast because you'll see those light fluctuations of your plate and you'll be able to better distinguish like, whoa, that got really dark and really bright in that. So, but yeah, I think that's super cool. And using the generative fill, again, it's iterating to kind of get it there and figure out the best way to prompt. We're using Photoshop to do that. There's a lot of tools that can do that, but Photoshop just is the most seamless, it feels like, and it keeps the resolution really tight with that. So yeah, I've been really happy with that. And I think Jay, you did that, the generative fill on that one, right? It's really good.
Yeah, that wasn't like, honestly, it was kind of funny because when you pulled it out and you were like, hey, I think this set works, I was like, whoa, that was one of the first ones we did.
I know.
So
yeah,
I'm glad we got to use it.
Yeah, me too.
It's just showing, like I've talked about in the last or 2 podcasts ago, was a variety.
Yes,
variety. Just
absolutely.
trying to not make everything look the same. So
yeah, and we have to always remember to our client, this is the first time they've seen that set, right? So maybe even something that's like, we have done this set a lot. To them, it's like the first time they've used it. But I think us keeping it fresh is valuable not only for us but also for them, right? It kind of helps build it all together a little more.
And for the debrief.
Yeah. That's true. That's just a bonus though. That's not the driving force. Hey, I want to move into the Nobe Omni.
I'm fairly certain it's a Nobe Omniscope.
Omniscope, fantastic. I'm looking at my notes and didn't see it in there. So I'm looking in Discord instead of our Notion document. I see now. So the Nobe Omniscope. So I want to look at Nobe Omniscope, and I want to talk about how we're using this. This is very cool. So Nobe Omniscope. Who found this? Isaac, did you find this?
Me. So I found it. I got a random YouTube video suggested to me of a guy who uses this for photo editing. And he talks about how it makes his photos more consistent. So if he's editing a wedding, right, keeping all the exposures of all his photos similar. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I haven't thought of using false color for photography. I've thought of it in videography, obviously, because we use it all the time on the cameras. But then I realized that this app has decklink input support. And I go, oh, well, wait, now we can do false color on anything, literally anything. And it does so much more than false color. But for now, we're really focused on the false color thing. So yeah, I found this app and I was like, hey, let's give it a shot. And so we did.
We did. And brought to you by Nobe Omniscope. We're not sponsored. This is something that we've paid our own money for. We've tried this tool and we bought it ourselves at full price. So it's like $400-ish.
Yeah, for the pro version. There is a lesser, like a cheaper version if you just want to use it in as like a plug-in. But this has deck link support. We can also do Stream Deck support, so we can trigger different tools and stuff. We don't use a ton of that yet, but I imagine I could see how we will in the future.
Okay, so check this out. So here's workflow pre-Nobe Omniscope. What we were doing before is we are using middle things to control our camera, and I could push a false color button and boom, it'll push out a false color image. Super cool. It's like, that's great. That's super awesome. Like, super helpful. What's wrong with that? Why would you not just use that? Well, a couple of things. One, although that's super cool, there are times that I want to see false color, but maybe someone else is adjusting something on set and now they can't really see what's happening because it's in the bizarre world of false color land. Or maybe the client is actually sitting on set, but I need to check some stuff with false color. And man, if you've ever used false color in front of a client who's not used to that, that immediately derails them and they can't help but look if they see themselves on camera. More importantly than that, though, one thing that was missing from false color is I didn't have the ability to see the final composited levels of both the background and the foreground. And so what this lets me do is that I can hop in and see all of that at one time. In fact, I guess I could kind of, is this?
Yeah, you can manipulate it.
Yep. So let me kind of hop over to my Ultimate station. I'll be kind of huge as I move over in this position. But just to kind of show you, as you look at this false color, one thing I could see, well, let me make it worse. Actually, let's take this and make it where this is a terrible, like, this looks bad, right? But just to kind of over exaggerate. So in this scenario, like, she is not at all the same exposures of what the actual environment is. Like, her face is totally blown out. Like, everything's like, I can see right away this black couch doesn't look at all right. So what I'm able to do, though, by seeing that coloring of that, is that I could go in and adjust my levels and start bringing my black levels down, right, until I see that my black levels are similar in exposure to the dark parts of the image themselves. So like, I'm looking at this piece back here, right? I'm looking at this shadowy area, especially noticing this kind of dark purple that I have here. And I'm trying to emulate that, right, in this little area through here, so that I can match those up and make them be similar in exposure. And then also, yeah, great. And so now you can see, like, here's kind of a version of that across. And so you can see that looks correct. Where again, if I had her again, this is dumb, but yeah, go ahead and let me see. So, like, obvious, I mean, of course, I'm ridiculously doing this, but obviously
she looks great.
She looks great,
like an angel. Really.
Like an angel. She's glowing like an angel, but that's obviously not right. And even just our defaults, so if you can kind of split screen that a little bit, we're already pretty close on all of that, right? That's pretty close, but I can see, like, especially go ahead and give me more false color there. I could see that I really still need to just kind of boost this up to get this more in alignment. And so just that shadow level of, okay, before, and let's go ahead and kind of look at our false color and see now a more probably how it would be. And again, I'm not even looking at the image itself, but now let's go back just to the actual final composited shot, not false color. You'll see here, like, this is the before straight out of camera, and here's the after. Yeah. And so you can see it just goes from, like, I mean, this doesn't look bad. And some of us may be tempted to have more dynamic range like this, but if I can push it into the colors, now the levels match a lot better. And then if you'll go back over to false color one more time, I'll just say the other thing we're doing is I want you to notice her face, and we are always trying to stay in this pink and then light gray, so that that light gray color that you see right here, that color is it's kind of frustrating that there's a light color here and then a dark gray color here.
There's a fun thing I want to say about that.
Okay, great. So pink and light gray, that's where I'm trying to stay for the highlights, is in that range right there on the skin tones. And then I'll just pick a different color real quick, cool, that's going slower than I was hoping it would go. And red, sure. And then this is where I'm trying to stay for the shadow side of the face. So this is the entire exposure range that we're trying to keep the face in. So what's cool about this, about being able to push into this, is we can see, like, are we hitting those exposure points? And then I can also see what else is brighter in the image than her face. Because remember, our eyes look not at the face, but we look at whatever is the brightest thing in the image. That's the thing our eyes go to first. So what's the brightest thing in this image? It's not her face. So what's the brightest thing? Where do you guys see it? Yeah, it's those lights right there. So those lights are the brightest thing, but they're kind of aligned with her face, and there's a leading line from that into her face. So I'm okay with that. I feel like that's fine. And it can help give us some motivation of lighting, of why that lighting is kind of hitting the side of the face. So we have a little bit of a rim right here that you can see on the top of her head. And there's a little bit on her cheek, and all of that can presumably be motivated from this warm light over here.
So something that's really cool about Omniscope that we haven't delved into is that you can edit this over here. So I don't remember. Oh, that's masking it. There are ways to go in. You can set different presets and modes. So we have it set to Blackmagic Video Assist because we're used to Blackmagic's false color, but we could do Red's false color, if we wanted to. So you can entirely customize this.
Yeah.
And I haven't entirely figured out where it is yet. And I did it once by accident. And I was trying to see if I could replicate it. You can add points on this. And so
it looked like, what did that happen?
This is a mask.
Yeah. When you just, oh, okay.
So I can, so this is more useful if you're doing like a vector scope or something.
Yeah.
Because it does that too. But I know there's a way to do, there's a way in here somewhere, I got to find it, where we could customize a false color. So we could create a false color for us that is more obvious in less stops of gray, right? And says the green screen is these colors, whatever. One thing that always confuses me about false color is this dark purple, where it looks like there is zero data here. It looks like there should be nothing. But when we go to the final one,
sure,
I can see stuff in there.
Yeah, of course.
And so something I think as something I'm getting used to is what means it's clipping information, because the red in the back is clipping information. There is no information in that signal, whereas there is information in the shadows. That's just pure white, right? There's no, but maybe there would be if it was a textured thing. But on some of those super dark areas where I would imagine, we've lost all information, there's still information. So that's something I'm still trying to get used to.
Yeah, so false color is showing you the brightness.
Right.
But it's doing it without tons of detail, right?
Right.
Right. But it's showing you, right. So that texture that's in the wood in that part that's purple, it's really just showing that brightness level is staying fairly uniform. And I will say, as it gets closer to the edge of that, it does crush that together more to make that a little more obvious. So, and there's tons of things. I don't think we have time to get into them now. Isaac's pulling up a few just so you can see, but there's a lot of options inside Nobe Omniscope. I'm super happy about it. When we're just like, what do we do with all our money? One of the things I probably would get is a Mac Studio just to power this. We're using a Mac Mini. It's an M1, and it's doing a fine job, but it's definitely...
it's about half the frame rate.
Yeah, I was going to say it's 10, 15 frames a second kind of thing. It's fine for false color, but it would be cool if it was just totally liquid smooth. But
it also too can support up to 4 inputs out of our deck link. So something that would be super cool if we were running a Mac Studio is to be able to make that compromise, but we could have false color of every shot. That
so you get the side shot,
so that way you can just have a big multi-view of all the false colors, and then you could just
that's cool. Let's talk about though how I'm using it. So I've been mapping this into my Ultimate controller,
right?
And so what that allows me to do is I can hop over here into my Ultimate controller, and as I toggle between the different shots, I'm able to see that change the false color as well. So that was super helpful yesterday for me to go through my shots. Something we have not been doing until we've started using Nobe Omniscope is I was just eyeballing like the final composite because I didn't have a way to do that.
Right.
So now I can look at each composite and I could check my black levels, my white levels for everything, foreground and background, and tune those up, and then make sure they're also consistent across every shot. So every shot has the same exposure value. Nothing's a little brighter or a little darker. It's an awesome tool.
The one thing I've always talked about is like the blending of the foreground and the background together. So there's like multiple elements that you use. Like obviously we do our hair lights and whatnot, wardrobe, and then what they're sitting on or what other elements of the set are. But this felt like a cheat code when we finally unlocked it. Being able to match the black levels and the brightness, all of that just helps that blending. And then you don't even think about it as a client or as a viewer. You just think they're in that room. So it's just selling it that much more. Yeah.
That's the magic, is when the foreground lighting and the background lighting match. Your brain just goes, oh yeah, they're in that space.
And like Andre said a second ago, we were just eyeballing it. And now we have scientific data that can back it up.
Well, and what's also awesome about that is as we get more and more tuned into false color, then that becomes more replicatable too. So now, even outside of the art of the set, we can kind of more SOP, standard operating procedure, be able to go in and be like, well, is the lighting, do we have those 4 graduations of light on their face? Awesome. We're killing it and we're ready to go. Unless you're in news and then you get 1 graduation of okay, I digress. Hey, let's talk about teleprompter. So I'd love to hear. So one of the things I was doing a lot of is not so much of the production the last 2 days. So I was in a lot of meetings, but Tyler and Jay, I'd love to hear, like, we did a lot of teleprompter in a lot of different ways. Can you talk, maybe Tyler, you can kick it off, talk about the different ways teleprompter was used on the production over these last 2 days.
Well, we basically had all the different ways you could use a teleprompter. Our first 2 folks used it as just notes, kind of prompts to talk from. The second guy read the last 2 read word for word scripts, and the first guy that did the word for word scripts was very practiced at it. And man, you could just tell because he just could roll with the script and it didn't sound like he was reading it. The second lady, she did great too, but you could tell she wasn't as practiced with reading from a script on a teleprompter. And the other guy he's a pastor, and so he had to write out his messages because he has a multilingual congregation, so he has to have interpreters that can read along with him. And so he was used to just doing that and reading that from the script. And then the second lady wasn't as used to it, and so it was his delivery was a lot more emotive, and hers wasn't at first, but then she kind of got into it. But seeing all of those different ways of using the teleprompter all in the same production was kind of fun.
She got into it after a while, and she got a lot better. I think the main difference was the first 2 people were just like freaking smart, and they were experts, right? So when you have an expert who is going to talk about something that they focus on daily, it is hey, there's a little bit of thunder. You may not be able to hear that if I do the voice isolation thing in DaVinci. But basically, if you have a subject matter expert and they are just dealing, the content is like hanging on the edge of your seat. You're able to really understand, and it feels more personal. They don't feel like a robot who is reading across the screen, and now I will move on to the next paragraph. They're just talking to you like a person. And I always talk about in directing, like pushing through stumbles. If you say the wrong word, we're going to go back and redo it. But if you kind of flub through things, man, it brings that authenticity across the screen. So when you have somebody who isn't reading word for word and they're just dealing the knowledge that they think and sit with every day, the quality of the content that comes out is just a lot better. So that's personally, our favorite way to use a teleprompter is to do bullet points, and then we let people expand upon those bullet points. It's more like, think of it as like you want to come in here and you can read word for word. We can do that. That's no problem. But the way we would want you to do it is for you to study up on what you have, and then for you to present. That is just a much better feel than having somebody read it. And I always love going back and like A-Bing the content, because you get a lot more, and this may sound like unprofessional, but in a weird way, it's it's just better for me, is you get a little bit more uhs and ums, and we like to cut those out as much as we can. But when you can see somebody like thinking through their thought process and like thinking through what kind of knowledge they're going to deal, it is a lot more legit isn't the right word, but it just
Authentic.
Yeah, authentic. Yeah. And that's all I try to do with people when they're in the chair is to bring that authenticity out of them. And it's just a lot easier and a lot better whenever they're dealing from the bullet points and the notes instead of just reading them word for word.
One thing,
some of these folks had, you could tell that they had thousands of hours in front of a classroom or speaking in front of groups because they were just so smooth. And they, one lady did a whole section where she just had one prompt and she spoke for, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes from just one prompt, just kind of winging it. But that was based on countless hours of delivering that content in front of groups. And as we've said before, the people that do the best are the people that have done a lot of stuff in front of live groups, because when you misspeak in front of a live group, you just kind of say, oh, what I meant to say was, or rather, and then they just go on. And man, these people were smooth, and they would make changes on the fly in their notes and just flow right through it. Where some people that are less experienced, that little stumble will make it where they have to stop and then kind of pick up. And Jay, you told them, and you've said this before, just keep going unless we stop you. And man, knowing that, combining that with their ability to speak in front of groups made them just fly through the content throughout the day.
I think the stumbling part and like telling them not to self-edit, it does two things. And this is what I always tell the clients. One, it makes you come across the screen more personal, more personable. Like if we don't stop you and you sort of flub, like I guess the example I was using was like they were all from Kentucky. So I said, oh, what if we're in a conversation and I said, man, I've been to Kentucky before. Sorry, I've been to Kentucky before. Not a laser perfect robotic take of every one. That allows some personality and you to be more authentic to come across the screen. But also what that does is it takes a lot of pressure off of the talent to not have that exact perfect take every single time. Because what that does is that just frees people away from being frozen and feeling like they have to make sure and like self-edit while they're trying to read and speak to a camera all at once, which just makes some people just completely almost shut down sometimes. So if you can take away that pressure of them having to have that perfect take, then you can really get people who get into a rhythm and get flowing. And that's always good because we get more content done, which is important, but more importantly, they're able to feel more comfortable and just get into that rhythm and kind of deal. I will say, as we were going through the written teleprompter scripts during the second part of the day, you can tell. So they had their first ones, like say the first 2 to 3, especially with a gentleman beforehand. Man, he was dealing, and it was great. You could tell he had read and rewritten it, and he was good at writing for reading and speaking. But as they got further on, they were kind of doing them as before they showed up, and as they got further on in the scripts, you would see words like, words that you wouldn't say. Yeah, therefore and whereas and stuff like that. Yes, exactly. So instead of just common speech. So that's also another big point, which Tyler's really good at talking about. It's like writing for speaking is always important, and we talk about that a lot. But it really can make or break your content.
One other element is when people are talking from bullet points, they can stop and look around. And especially this first guy, he would gesture and he would look around and he would look down and look up. The second lady did the same thing. She would stop and think and pause or whatever. But with folks, if they're reading straight from a prompter, their eyes are locked on to that lens, looking straight into that lens. And they may gesture and do stuff like this, but they cannot take their eyes off of that prompter, because then they lose, I don't know if they lose their place or something. Now, some people can stop and look away and come back to the prompter, but pretty much everybody else, their eyes are just locked on rather than being able to be expressive. So that's one element to consider.
Yep.
So the other thing is, like, when you're reading, you can turn off your brain and you can just be, I am reading the words on the script. And it's like, I was kind of thinking about the debrief, like we could totally take extra time And first of all, we don't have a lot of extra time, so this is kind of why this is done this way. But also, like, we could sorry, I didn't even finish my sentence. We could take extra time and edit this and make that sentence that I just said that wasn't even complete a complete sentence. And we could go through and do that. But instead, we are valuing the rawness of the conversation, right? Because it's like, we believe there's something in this setting that's like, hey, we're hanging out with you right now. Whatever you're doing, watching us right now, we're hanging out with you, you know? And so we want to come across as ourselves, as who we are. This is us for real, you know? So this is exactly how we actually are as people, or at least we're all aware of a camera, but we're trying to do as best as we can to just be us and to just be natural. And we'll trade off some efficiency, because obviously these aren't the shortest videos. But in exchange for that, what I hope you're getting is a sense of camaraderie. Even though we may not be able to hang out with each of you individually, it's a chance for us to kind of all hang out together and for you to hang out with us. And so we love that you're spending your time hanging out with us, and we hope we're making this really worthwhile. But there's all these, like, especially in a group world like this, there's a lot of little dynamics that we'll do during this that are just as important as teaching the film stuff, as we kind of are always working hard to be a cohesive, high functioning team, you know? So, but yeah, so I think the end result is teleprompter itself is not the problem, right? So we've seen people over the last 2 days read a word for word script as if it was flowing from the first thoughts of their brain. And then we've also seen people use bullets and flow as if, it's just contemporaneous thought. Extemporaneous thought. I'm like, that. See how that felt natural? But that was written in the script. I'm just kidding.
This whole debrief has been on teleprompter.
This is actually a word for word teleprompter. But there's something in that's awesome. But we've also seen both of those things fail. So at the end, the tool is not the problem, but I will tell you, in general, I will default to believing the production quality of watchability will be lower the more word for word the script is. And the production quality experience will be higher the more bullet point, concept point, whatever way that's written, is done. So just for whatever that's worth, that's where I will land on it. Now, one thing I will say about the people that came is they were like machines, man. They were just ready to film and talk. And Sir Tyler Owens sat at the TD station and cut. And I noticed as a manager of like, oh man, poor Tyler, he has to be like locked on, glued to this all day. I mean, just all day. So I didn't anticipate that level of like, I think if we said you cannot use the bathroom all day long and instead you have to film and be on camera the entire, I think they would have done it.
I think the reaction would have been, I was never planning on the bathroom. I don't understand why
I would need to do that. So something I realized is we need to think through some better continuity of service for giving the TD a break. I mean, Tyler, you handled it like a champ, so it's not a criticism, but it just felt like, man, this kind of feels unfair because, I mean, you killed it. So maybe you were loving every minute of it, but I felt like I wish I could give him like just a mental reset break. Just close your eyes. Don't have to do this for a minute and just kind of reset a little. But I realized to do that, and I don't know how exactly we'd do that, but it would seem as if the way we would have performed that is then it would be like, okay, we're bringing on the assistant to the regional technical director to sit next to you for a minute, have them watch your pacing. Because what I realized was like, oh, what if we start like, now we're cutting every 3 seconds to something different? That could be jarring to the viewer, right? So it needs to kind of follow the rhythm that you've established. So I don't know, but in my mind, it and open to conversation around this, but it's almost like, hey, you've been doing this for 3 hours solid. Let's do a transition and give you a 15-minute little break, or whatever it is.
When you're in the flow of it, you don't think about, or I don't think about, I need to take a break. But later on in the day, I was like, yeah, it would be nice to have maybe a 15-minute break. These guys can, well, that's usually the case is, they want to stop. Hey, can I take a little break or whatever? Or we'll say, hey, would you like to stop and take, collect your thoughts or whatever? And then people do that. These guys were just amazing. And they just kept going and going and going and going. And the guy that was directing them said, well, why don't you go up until the time that she takes over, and then she can go on from there. And then
which is fresh energy coming into the
Jay and I were kind of like, I guess we're not going to eat lunch. So, but being able to have a little bit of a break would be nice. It is very intense. And so by the end of the day, man, I'm just like, my brain is fried, because what I'm doing is I'm listening to what they're saying. And I typically will cut to the side angle shot when they're giving an example or talking about something that's outside of the main what they're delivering. So they're talking about a topic, and then they kind of go off on a side trail to explain something. That's when I'll cut to the side angle, because I like to have them looking into the camera, talking about something important. Or if they're doing a hand gesture that's right up near their face or something, then I can get that from a side angle and kind of feel that better. Whereas if they're being very expansive with their gestures, then I'll want to be on the wide shot. But yeah, it was kind of tough. And then we ended up just having ran and got a plate of food and sat and ate it right there just so we could keep going. But yeah, I guess having somebody that could step in and maybe it wouldn't be such a problem to have. Maybe people wouldn't notice any kind of change in editing style or something.
This doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
So this is just for like the past 2 days. But when you have a cool boss who then you get a phone call from the news who says, "Can you go live at 9 p.m.?" and he's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And then he let Tyler and I kind of have the rest of the day off. And it is like a decompression moment. Like after I listen to so much content and I'm editing and sort of directing at the same time, you do have to walk away and like I didn't touch my phone. Like I went home and like watched baseball and left my phone like at the edge of the couch and was like, I can't touch it or look at anything that has to deal with text or people talking or anything. So
I tell you who it's really intense for though is operating teleprompter, because the teleprompter operator absolutely can do nothing else except look at the prompter words and follow along and pace with that person talking. I mean, when you're operating teleprompter, it's even worse than when you're TDing, because you can't even let somebody talk to you, because you can't lose track of where the person is on those word for word scripts. And that person's intense experience.
Yeah, and we can give a shout out because we only had teleprompter twice for 2 people, and on the second person, Morgan, who was running teleprompter, had to be in another meeting. So our legend Emma stepped in and she killed it and did a really good job.
Did a really good job.
I had to throw that out there as well. So.
Yeah. So that was great. So Tyler, I've never heard you say the cut to the side
philosophy
for side tangent. I like that. Yeah, no, that was super cool. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'd never heard that. That's very cool. I learned something new. So okay, listen, a couple things that I just want to hit quickly. When it comes to hospitality, which is a big focus of ours, one thing I felt was just like, oh man, I don't know any of these people and they don't even know us. In fact, it's possible they don't even know the name of the studio because their boss told them to come. And so that was an interesting thing of like, oh, right. Always be intentional about creating a relationship, however micro it can be, to just remind them like we're here to support them, or not remind them, to tell them for the first time, we're here to support them and encourage them. Because I can't imagine that's necessarily getting transmitted to them through their leadership, So that was interesting to just kind of work through that. And I think we did a great job. I think Emma always welcomes everyone so well. But, just knowing the team, it's like, oh, right, we're now introducing all of us to you at one time. Here's all these names, So anyway, I think everyone did a great job with that. And I think we were actually able to create some really cool relationships over the past few days. It's always fun to be able to make new friends. It's what a blessing. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say one quick thing. I do think I've agreed. Tyler said this. I agree with him. I do think we all need some like name tag system, like some good looking name tag thing we can all wear. So it's not like, because everyone feels that pressure of like, oh, I need to know your name. And we're like, we don't care. There's 6 of us in here and you're going to, it doesn't matter. Like you've never met any of us. It's fine. And then I also think we need to start when we can, just literally doing like Quizlet flashcards of person's face and their name, because it's like we didn't do a good job of having that pre-morning briefing the past couple of days of who's coming in,
Correct.
What is their name, what are they here for. Now, some of that we didn't know, but like we knew we had pictures and names for everybody. But something I noticed is even when we have that, when we're given names and pictures, sometimes the name in the email excludes the fact that that person's a doctor. Like they're
Right.
doctor, whatever
Right.
their name is. And it's like, oh, I want to respect that. And it's like, and then you can tell me if you don't like being called doctor, but
Right.
I would presume that if you spend a lot of time getting a doctorate, you'd prefer to be called doctor,
yeah.
whatever your
one
name
of the guys
is.
has 2 doctorates from Oxford. Yeah. So of course, for sure. So yeah. So one of our better lessons learned is like, hey, we've got to really establish a clear pre-job briefing of like, okay, here's what we're doing today. Here are the sets. Here are the people's names. This is what they look like, and having that ready to go and showing on the screen for all of us to look at.
And it's not like we didn't have that bank. I think we just did a bad job of it, looking at it, because the
As a
team.
team.
Yeah, I think between Emma and Isaac, like Notion has everybody in there. So yesterday we were recording like the second person, and I'm like, what's her name? Because I'm like entering the data or whatever, and then it hits me. I'm like, oh, you're an idiot. I can literally go copy and paste her name from the Notion document. Then I know it, and then so for me personally, I'll speak for myself because I don't like speaking for other people. But I could have done a lot better job of looking at the actual document that has all of that information already loaded into it.
You know, with all the screens we have in the control room here, it seems like we could have one that would have
Whoa,
go-
Where'd it go? Look at us. What's it focusing on? Oh, hi, Tyler.
Hey.
Hey.
Seems like we could have one of our multitudinous screens have like a, you know, like an FBI profile photo with their essential data on there that we could just reference throughout the day. Also, I think Isaac, you and Emma did some really good work on finding out did they wear glasses?
Yeah, we asked them all those
and you
questions.
had what was the music that they liked? So we already kind of had that information. That was kind of nice because sometimes we're having to ask people, "Hey, what kind of music do you like?" No, really, it's okay if it has bad words. We'll play it. That's fine.
Yeah.
No. We'll play anything.
We know you
really.
still love God. It's okay. It's
But people don't believe us when we say, no. What music do you like? We'll literally can play anything. But to this time they already had that planned out. One lady liked Bach. Was it in other soothing
and other similarly calm music?
Yes,
Like, well,
right,
I think we should play Metallica. That's what I said to you. I also
by default, of course.
Right.
But
What I thought was interesting, just real quick, was one of the people though had their preferences listed. And then when we asked them in person, they said something that wasn't even on there. So it's still important to talk to them because they weren't in the mood for that thing.
Beats talk. Well, and things change. A couple of just quick hits. I know we've gone kind of long on this one. Just a couple of quick things to say. My most awkward moment was applying lotion to a leather chair.
We don't have any B-roll of that, do we?
It's a beautiful thing. Yes. But I did have to, the leather chair had just gotten really dry and it was like kind of reflecting green a little bit more, and it felt a little counterintuitive, but not this chair, but the other chair. But I was able to put that in where that chair on the arm, we put a blanket over one of them, but on the other one, it was still just you can still see it still kind of dry, but that's after I applied some lotion. So just an interesting upkeep thing. We need to kind of like condition our leather on our chairs. We had an issue with DMX where the lighting was not correctly responding. So I would set in Lumenair, which is our iPad app that we use to DMX control our lighting. And I would go in and I was setting that lighting color temperature to like 4200 or whatever. And I was like, man, it sure does look blue or yellow. I can't remember which way it was going, but I'm like, this is weird. I can't figure out what's happening. We went and looked at the actual units and they were actually off by a number. I'm just going to say 500 or 1000 off, whatever it was. And so the Kelvin was off enough that even though I was adjusting it, it wasn't doing what it was supposed to. And so, Morgan, I wanted you to talk about, have you talked on this debrief? Morgan's here. Hey,
Yes, I am here.
What's up? What happened there and how did you fix that? Real quick?
So kind of, we show it here on the screen. This is Lumenair, the app. You can set a range for the cool and warm, the low temp and the high temp. And what happens is when you load the profile, they have pre-built profiles for most lights inside of Lumenair, if you pay for the subscription, which we do. But sometimes they're off a little bit. And so here you can kind of see the low and the high temp. And for us, this is a Hive 200, and this would be the correct range for that light. For us, the color temp problem was with the IntelliTech lights, and they have a different range. And for whatever reason, that was not getting translated. And that was why we were seeing that 1000 variance, because it sets the scale of that kind of behind it. It's hard to see here of the temp from warm to cool. And so once you set that range, it kind of clamps down and prevents you from going outside the range. So it kind of sets the would you call it the scale or
Sure,
like
yeah.
the
Yeah,
marking?
it basically that slider that's behind there, it's going to set the extremes so that when you pick any value, it can calculate what that value would be within the extremes. So if your extremes are set wrong, it's going to send because it's converting color temperature back to a DMX value that it's sending. It's kind of obfuscating the exact level it's sending. So if 110 is 4200 Kelvin, that's not right at all. But if it were, then when you set it to 56 on here, it was sending 112 because it thought that was the number it needed to send, but it wasn't, basically.
Yeah, and you can only send up, I believe in DMX, it's up to 256, 0 to 256,
Right.
as far as the internal value.
Right.
So if we don't have that, then that can totally mess with that.
So the fix for this was setting a low temp and high temp, just their absolutes of whatever the fixture could support.
Which we were able to determine that by looking at the screen on the IntelliTech control box and setting it to the min and setting it to the max. That kind of told us the exact range if you can't find it in the manual for the light.
I am curious, though, how this hasn't been a problem. And then it kind of became one somewhere along the way. And I'm wondering...
We created a new profile. That's the difference, because we added all these Hive lights that we purchased. So we made a whole new project, and that didn't get transferred because we started completely fresh. That's the difference.
If you haven't seen one of the other debriefs, I ended up buying like 200 Hive lights, and so we have a ton of lights that we've been deploying into the studio. It's been
so many
insane. It's pretty insane. But hey, look, this lighting's better. So I've got like 35 of them in here. Okay, so that's probably all the main things. Is there any other major thing? I had one other idea that we were talking about. We can push that into another episode. I would like to say, hey, if you've gotten this far, first of all, just thank you so much. It's so cool that you will watch this, of us talking about this stuff. This has primarily been built for us to kind of just talk through, debrief the day of what it is we did. But also we want this show to be a show of the kind of information I wish other studios would talk about. So if you're a studio, consider doing something like this. We'd love to learn from you too. We're trying to share every secret we have. And then along those lines, if you're a studio that we could help, let us know. We'd love to help you. And so SociallyU.com/consulting is a page you can go to, or just go to SociallyU.com and click on Studio Consulting from the menu. But we're kind of officially announcing that we're available to help consult and work with other organizations. And that's been awesome. I've actually been kind of surprised and thankful for all of you that have reached out to us. It's been pretty amazing. And there's been some really large entities that have reached out to us over the past few weeks since we've kind of announced that we're doing this. So if that's something that you're like, man, I wish I could help get some help from SociallyU and get some of this figured out, just know we're like super interested in doing that. And we have done everything from just kind of like a second look at someone else's proposal of what they were going to do as a system integrator, all the way to kind of a full system integrator and even beyond with innovating some new technology that I can't wait to share as we get a little further down the path. So those are things that we're working on. We are so thankful that you take the time out of your day to spend an hour with us talking through all this. I hope this has been helpful to you. We've had a blast doing these past few days of shooting.
And there's more. There's a few more days too. This is 2 days of a 4-day shoot throughout this week. We're right in the middle of it, so that's fun.
Spoiler. Yeah. There'll be more to come. All right. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.